What role does foreign aid play in international relations? I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. There's one fact that spurred today's conversation. It's that there are infinite problems in this world and finite resources, and even further, finite attention spans. It's just the reality of the world that we cannot fix everything. We have to prioritize. Now, how does that fact overlay with something like foreign aid? To approach this question, we can actually think about aid in general, even on a micro level. Imagine yourself. There is a hierarchy of affinity that applies here. You care more about your family and your friends than strangers. You care more about those who are allied with you than those who are opposed to you. This type of affinity even applies to the government. They are going to have an affinity for their own tax base over other people. They're going to have an affinity for allied countries versus those who are opposed to them. Just like how when you are making personal decisions about what or who is going to get some of your attention, your time, and your resources, the government will also have to factor in similar considerations when making a similar decision. Now, you can also pair the concept of opportunity cost here. Every dollar spent on something like foreign aid is a dollar not spent on something like sorting out domestic issues, which there is no shortage of. And you can take Canada as an example there. There are tons of things that people are calling for, but the government will simply say there is no money for it. How do you square that? These are realities that every government has to grapple with, and as citizens, we have to be knowledgeable of the process too. So, if the government steps out of bounds, we can hold them accountable. Now, having laid down that philosophical framework, I do think there is a role for foreign aid to play. It would be wrong, I believe, for Canada to offer none to the international community. There are, for example, tragedies that by us stepping up, we can alleviate some hardship. There's even a strategic benefit to foreign aid, especially in oppressive governments. If their money supply is tied to Canada, for example, we can encourage them, and sometimes it becomes more of a coercion, to do the right thing, to move them towards Western values, to perhaps encourage them to do things like allow girls to go to school. And if they don't, well, they're going to be losing out on a lot of money. And even though that money is likely going to line the dictator's pocket, we can force some positive outcomes from this exchange. Fundamentally, though, I believe it's the responsibility of the local governments to look out for their people. And that's their first priority. That's their job and their mandate. The government of Canada is looking out for Canada first and foremost. Our interests cannot be put secondary to other considerations. And I believe that other countries should look out for their people. And of course, there is varying degrees of capability. And that's why I do think there is room for foreign aid. But it cannot become excessive. In exceptional circumstances, it is totally permissible. But what you do not want to do is become a crutch, is to enable bad habits from governments, is to enable a government who could otherwise solve a problem on their own, but just pass the buck onto Canada or America because they're willing to foot the bill. That's not a good situation to be in. You can view this through the lens of individuals as well. On a micro level, I believe families are responsible for their family. That's their utmost priority. And I believe that by every family taking that responsibility seriously, even though there are different means on the table here, everyone is better off by everyone handling their own business overall. And there are going to be individuals who cannot do that. And just like how there is room for foreign aid, on a micro level, there has to be room for social services to fill in the gaps there. But it shouldn't be the responsibility of each family to subsidize all the other ones, even when there's an opportunity for the other ones to, first of all, find their own way. And second, maybe they already have a way, a mechanism to handle their problem, but they're not inclined to use that because they become reliant on another. We see people who are totally reliant on the state. That's not freedom. Freedom comes with responsibilities. And of course, those responsibilities can sometimes be too much for you. And I believe those individuals should have help available. But it should be help to get them back on their feet. It shouldn't be a lifeline that extends ad infinitum. Now, to get back to the topic of foreign aid, generally speaking, I am against providing just pure cash to other countries who are requesting foreign aid. Now, the reason for that is oftentimes there is a sort of corruption that occurs. Especially if you're looking at something like an authoritarian regime. If we were to give $10 million, for example, to North Korea is a country where the people are destitute. They live in abject poverty. How much of that 10 million do you think will actually go towards helping the people? What if it was $1 billion given to Kim Jong-un? How much do you think he'd funnel back to the people? It's unlikely that even a cent will go towards that end. But, and this is where I think foreign aid can be most effective, what if we give Kim Jong-un 1,000 pounds of bread? He's not going to be able to eat all of that by himself. There's a higher likelihood that that actually gets spread out throughout the populace to solve a problem. For example, if famine was an issue. I believe in providing the resources that people need, not the money that can be used for whatever means those in power can choose. If you need food, we'll give you food. If you need water, we'll give you water. If you need access to manual labor, or engineers, or doctors, we can send those people there to help out and provide services. Even in the case of Ukraine, and luckily this is what's happening, they need military equipment, we'll give you military equipment. What we won't do is give you $1 billion in cash. Zelensky, although has the favor of most people, like most government figures, I would not trust with that type of money. Who knows what he would do with it, or what gets skimmed off. If there is a valid cause, we're going to give you things that will directly contribute to that. And even if we gave him $1 billion, the agreement is to buy military equipment. I'm going to cut out that risk and just give you the military equipment from the get-go. This type of foreign aid, where we're focusing on the actual things, the goods or the services that will produce the most good for the country, that's something I can get behind. Writing blank checks, that on the other hand is something I oppose. Now, if we analyze Canada, it's reported that in 2021, we had spent about $8.4 billion in international assistance spending. Now, that's interesting because it does matter what that was put towards, and further, if we can demonstrate that that money produced the outcomes we wanted. If we were just writing blank checks to dictators, I'm not sure that was good. But if we provided resources that people needed, and we helped them with true services to get them back on their feet, that would be good. And these numbers are so large, it's hard to even conceptualize what you can accomplish with that. It's a ton of money. Now, we can debate if that was too much or too little, or if we have to increase it or decrease it, but without understanding the facts, what that money is comprised of, what it went to, the outcomes, it's hard to say. What I do know for sure, though, is that there's probably ways to optimize that. There's probably ways to analyze this budget to ensure that more people are helped with it. That money isn't spent frivolously. Now, the reason why I can be so confident that there is some type of optimization that can be had here is because of facts like this. So, in 2020, the Canadian government sent $14.2 million in foreign aid to China. Now, that's quite stunning. China is the second largest economy in the world. Maybe even the largest, depending on how you do the math there. And Canada is giving them foreign aid. It's ridiculous. But somehow, that's part of the equation. There's no way you can justify that. I can think of dozens of other countries and situations and disasters that would be more qualified to receive such funding. China is perfectly capable of handling their own economic affairs. Something like that makes me think that there's a lot of nonsense going on at the governmental level. Now, above all of this, I do think there's actually an even better solution rather than individual countries giving money on a whim without much of a guideline. I do think that the UN could have a role to play here And I'd support a development of a central agency that would issue out loans to country with extremely small interest rates that would be paid back. So, for example, to develop this committee and for members to join in, there'd be a one-time payment of whatever it is, a fraction of your GDP. And with that, we'd create a reserve. And that reserve could be invested in other things so it grows and beats inflation. Now, whenever a country has a pressing issue and they need funding immediately, there is a natural disaster, there is whatever, something that's happening that's beyond their means, and we know that it will be beyond their means if they're coming to this program because there'd be a small interest rate. It's not just free money. And further, I'd even support this interest fee being waived for countries who have a GDP below a certain threshold, for example. Now, they be coming with a need. They can put in their request and it'd be approved almost instantly. Then they can get access to these funds almost instantly. They can resolve their issue and they can pay it back as they find means to do that. This form of solution makes a lot more sense to me. You can even treat this reserve as an investment fund to spur innovation and develop local economies in countries that need that. It's a much more standardized protocol, and it's something that can thrive off of itself. It's something that can be completely self-sustaining if paid back with interest and the investments pan out, things like that. And if we do find ourselves running low, we can revisit replenishing such a fund. This is where international collaboration definitely has a role to play. I don't think it should be any one country's responsibility to help out another, but on the global playing field, we all have a joint responsibility to look out for our fellow man. And it has to be fair. In some ways, it's similar to climate change. One country cannot and should not bear the entire brunt of such a phenomenon. It has to be a global effort. This is the way forward, and we have to start thinking along these lines. So now with that, it does bring us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the material, be sure to leave a review and share to help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.